Oh, that's nice. You already rated them yourself.
Oh, so I keep them over to the side so that we can move them over in time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's this isn't the actual rating. We're gonna figure that out on ourselves. Welcome back, everybody, to another tier list. I love doing these mainly because you don't just get to listen to me. We have a guest with us today. If you haven't already followed their channel, I've left it all down below. But please introduce yourself. Who are you and why are you here?
My name is Naomi, and you might know me from the channel of 365 Days of Prog. It's a series I do here on YouTube where I review albums throughout 2022, and each day there's a new album. But yeah, now today I'm here to talk about one of the most interesting bands to have come to the prog scene in, we'll say, recent years, or at least in the 2000s. And I am super excited for this one.
Yeah, so am I. So the band we're talking about today and the one that we'll be putting through the tier list is Moon Safari. Now, I can talk at length about Moon Safari, and I've already done like way in my past a bunch of videos about Moon Safari. But I'm really interested to hear your experience and your journey with Moon Safari. How did you get into them? Did you just discover them for your channel? Talk to me about that a little bit.
So, Moon Safari, okay, this is like closing a circle on here because I've actually discovered Moon Safari from one of your videos. Yeah, I know I keep on flattering and it's just too much. But yeah, there's a video I believe you made on Blomljud, if that's how you're supposed to
Mhm.
pronounce it.
Yep.
But I saw that video because the thumbnail just really caught my attention. Like the cover of the album was just
Mhm.
so weird in some way. It looked very unprofessional, and I was like, "What is this album?" So I came in and check it out, and I was blown away by this. Like I was really surprised, and this came in a time where I was not discovering a lot of things like in the prog scene, and definitely not in you know late 2000s prog, because one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing right now is because I came to the realization I'm just not discovering enough new music. And this one I discovered like 2 years ago from that specific video, and from the moment I listened to this album I got hooked on it. It's so good. It really amazed me. So naturally, of course, I went ahead and I checked the rest of the albums, but I left one which I didn't hear until just, a couple of weeks ago, which was their latest one, Himlabacken Volume 1. But other than that, this band just really amazed me, and I'm only now like starting to realize how strong the Swedish prog scene is. Like prog and metal as a whole from Sweden is just amazing. But if you really, you put a gun to my head and have to choose, and like I had to choose one band which was the best to come out of Sweden in the prog scene recently, it would have to be Moon Safari.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat in terms of my enjoyment of Moon Safari. Like the Swedish progressive rock, starting from about the mid 90s, really has exploded. And I do feel as though Moon Safari is probably the best iteration of all that. They really put emphasis on harmonizations, not only within their instruments, which I feel is the major emphasis right now, but mainly within their harmonies, because I think everybody in the band sings. So they don't have like one main singer. Everybody has their turn, and that's within and between tracks as well. So I got into Moon Safari back in about 2010, 2011. And this was when I had essentially run out of all the big prog bands of the time. Like I had already listened to all of Opeth stuff, all of Dream Theater stuff, all of Porcupine Tree stuff, and I was craving more, but all of those were very dark, very depressing, very like looking on the darker side of human nature, and that's just not my bag. Like that's not my style. I was looking for something that was emulating more of like a Yes, or something that was like a celebratory nature. and I stumbled across like these guys and Kappa and Unitopia and like all these like really big sounding like symphonic prog. And yeah, I fell in love with them. Blomljud was the first one I listened to. Lover's End was the second one that I listened to. Both just brilliant stuff. And then I heard Doorway to Summer, and like my life changed forever. And yeah, I remember when Himlabacken came out, and it was the first one that I got to listen to on like release day, and it was just such a brilliant time to have like a new Moon Safari album. And now it's been like almost 10 years, and we're still waiting for the next one. um, but yeah, that's been kind of my journey with Moon Safari. So let's actually put these guys to the tier list. Let's actually plunk these guys down. So we've got, I always like to cap it off at D. D for me is like a little bit of like a failure. It's like it's not great. Like you don't even really need to listen
Yeah.
to it, because I don't feel as though they've put out anything lower than a D. Heck, I don't even think they've put out anything lower than a B. But we'll get to that in a bit. So S is obviously like superior. It is
Yeah.
like divine. It's a masterpiece. There's no duds on it. A is like it knew the assignment and passed with flying colors. And B is like it's great, it's good, but it probably like there's some scuffs, there's some scrapes. And C is like, yeah, there's some definite room for improvement. And yeah, D is like, yeah, you kind of failed
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So now that we kind of know where each of these tiers are, let's start with their debut album, A Doorway to Summer.
Nice.
I
So,
will let you take the starting point for this. What do you think about this album?
so A Doorway to Summer, as I said, it wasn't the first one I was introduced to. It's actually the second one. So I clearly remember myself listening to this one, like a few weeks after I discovered Bloomington, and like, didn't grow bored of it, just wanted to explore more. So I went with this one mainly for the cover.
Mm-hmm.
It like kind of resembled in colors at least the ones of Blomljud, so I just went with this one. And I tend to think whenever I review like a debut album, I look at these albums very critically, because there probably are so many bands that could have been fantastic, like amazing, but their debut just wasn't really good enough, so they didn't make it.
Right.
And thus, a debut is very important. And more than that, even the first track on the debut is, a lot of the selling point. If your first track isn't good, isn't representing, people, got bored of it, you're not going to stay for the entire ride. No one has to be committed to your music. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. And this one is a fine example of this being done pretty well. Now, I'm not saying great, because honestly, the first track on here, being Doorway, is a fantastic track. I really like this one. It's really great, and I think it's a great opener. But then I listened to a track like Dance Across the Ocean,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of started fantasizing, what if that track would open this album instead?
Mm.
And that made me think that if they actually opened it up with Dance Across the Ocean, it would be a fantastic hook. Like, just imagine yourself getting into this album, playing, like putting it on play, and the first thing you hear is like this ba da ba ba like
Right,
that they do.
right.
It's like there's no coming back from that.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
if this track did not exist, which is by the way my personal favorite from this album,
mm-hmm.
well, actually, you know what? Okay, we'll talk about it more in a second, but
Yeah.
I think they could have opened it up with Dance Across the Ocean. Um, it is truly a great song, uh, and it's progressive, but it isn't pretentious in any way. And like,
Okay.
I'd expect them to be more, because they feature, a lot of talent, as you said. All of them sing. They use harmonies in ways that are unheard of in Prague most of the time. Like,
Yeah.
you put a lot of emphasis on the instruments because everyone's a virtuoso, everyone thinks he's a virtuoso when it comes to progressive rock. But then you
Yeah.
have these guys that can do so much with just their voice, and of course we're going to get into that when we talk about Blomljud. But this one in particular just amazed me. I think the direction wise, it has it has the Moon Safari sound, which
Hmm.
is again something you don't get to see with a lot of debut albums. Um, One moment. So you don't really get to see it with a lot of debut albums. So I can only name a few bands which I think really nailed their own sound right from the get go. So like
Right.
maybe Gentle Giant, and
Hmm.
honestly, I don't even think, like, I can't think of anyone else. But they just did this one so fantastically, and I really, really like this one. But I think that conceptually, going in like one cohesive direction, this could have been done better. And
Okay.
that's where I prefer their later music, and that's also why this one is not an S tier for me per se.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. See, I this might be where we disagree quite a bit, because for me, I think that this is one of their strongest albums. Um, the only like I see exactly what you're talking about with Dance Across the Ocean. Um, and you know what? I'm just gonna do this right now. Give me a second. No, I don't think I could turn that off. Okay, sorry. Um, because Dance Across the Ocean definitely opens up with a much more tangible and much more emphasis. That's not a word. Much more emphasis. I was trying to think of like a verb of emphasis. Um, so, but I feel like because Doorway is bookended with Beyond the Door, that's why I feel like it opens and closes perfectly. Because the Doorway, the first track, is them setting up the conclusion of Beyond the Door. Um, but I still wonder, like, it could still work if you put Dance Across the Ocean first and then put Doorway second, because then you have like this kind of open and closed aspect of it. Um, I also really, really love the buildup of A Son of Your Own. That third track, I love how it starts off very somber, because both Doorway and Dance Across the Ocean are big, big tracks. Um, and A Son of Your Own is a little bit smaller starting, and then it really blossoms and grows and explodes into this massive sounding track at the end. Um, but for me, really, it's the We Spin the World, the 24-minute epic
Yeah.
on this album, that really, like, it's one of my all-time favorite epics. Um, it's it always gives back to me, and it reminds me of some of the more intimate and personal moments from like a John Williams score, like something from like The Lion King or something like that. Like this big, big sound in a very intimate, small moment. Um, so for me, like, it always goes back and forth as to what is my favorite Moon Safari album, and it's like this one and one other one that are always neck and neck as to what my favorite one is. So I mean, originally I was going to put this right up into the S tier, like right up there, right at the top, right in, like, because for me it is an absolute masterpiece. It's by far like the gold standard in terms of celebratory, very like happy sounding, very optimistic sounding retro prog. This is like the gold standard. Um,
So yeah,
but
okay. So the
so
one,
where
yeah.
would you place it in here? And we'll try to
Okay, so
find a
the one
happy
thing I
medium.
didn't talk about, and I think that's like the selling point, is of course we spin the world as being like this big epic on here. And whenever I review an album, I rate each and every song, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean that at the end I do an average of like every rating and I just call it the rating for the album, because there are certain tracks which are more than others, like in mass
Mm-hmm.
and size and like memorability. And this one definitely is. And I think, although it doesn't really cement my view on it, I think We Spin the World is overall my favorite track on here, and I like have to acknowledge it. I have a soft spot for, long epics. I love
Hmm.
them. I
Hmm.
love the fact that songs can, you know, explore so many things, and I don't really care for it being long as well. Like as long as it's, progressive and changing enough. I just really like this one. And yeah, I would say that this is my favorite from this album as well. And
Hmm.
looking at, like, if this album was only comprised of We Spin the World and Dance Across the Ocean, I would basically tell you now, yeah, this is an S tier for sure.
Hmm.
Doorway to me seems a bit longer than I'd like it to be in some way,
Okay.
because it doesn't, as you said, I don't think it's really an introduction or like building up to anything like to Dance Across the Ocean, because it's really a standalone piece.
Hmm.
The way I could see this album working is if Doorway was like something shorter, like introducing some motifs, then reintroducing them like at the end.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's a big track, which I am not entirely into all that much. And A Son of Your Own is one that I have to admit I kind of forget about at times, which is really bad. I don't know why, because it honestly, if I just look at it objectively, it has everything that I like about a song. I just
Hmm.
I know I forget about it all the time. It's not the one I'd come back for to this album for. So I would put this one as an A, and yes, because I am comparing it to the other Moon Safari ones, and yeah, this would be an
Okay.
A for
Okay.
me.
Oh boy. Now, would you feel comfortable if it goes into the S category? Or is it like a stand, like, "Oh, I don't think it really deserves that"?
Okay, I'm gonna ask you this:
Okay.
can we like put other albums in the S category,
Oh,
like
absolutely. Oh yeah,
make
it's
their
not.
orders so like this one is S, but this one is like an S or S.
Oh, I see what you mean. I mean, it is our list and we can do whatever we want with it.
Yeah.
It's just I don't know if I could put it like from again, because for me this is a perfect album. Um like there's no wasted space, but I can kind of understand where you're coming from. So that's why I'm asking if you would feel comfortable putting it into the S category. Um
I would,
okay,
but
okay,
you're gonna
okay.
have to make some compromises later.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so we have settled on that one. Let's
Amazing.
then talk about their follow-up, the big double disc Blomljud.
Yeah,
This was the one that I
I
got
think.
introduced to them from, and I think this is the one that you also got introduced to them from. So yeah, I can take the lead on this one because you took the lead on the last one. Um, I
Okay, you go at
I
it.
this has Moon Safari's best music on it. The first record with, the Methuselah's Children, Moonwalk, Bluebells, and Ghosts of Flowers Past. Those songs are absolute masterpieces. Like they are some of the best music ever recorded, I will say. Like this is a top tier for me. The only like it's so hard for me to talk about this album in terms of like a rating like aspect, like trying to rate this album, because the second disc does fall off a little bit. Like I love the 30-minute big epic, The Other Half of the Sky. I don't know if it really needs to be 30 minutes. I think they could have probably shaved off about 10 minutes of that and we wouldn't have lost too much. um but I also think that they kind of spin their wheels a little bit on some of the smaller tracks off of that second album. So it's a little bit of a shame because like Yesker's Farm is fantastic and I love how they open up that second album. Um, but yeah, the smaller tracks off of that one just I don't know, don't quite hit quite as hard, but that first disc, start to finish masterpiece. Like
Yeah.
some of the best music, as I mentioned, ever recorded. It's just a shame that it is kind of, I don't want to say sullied, but there's more music on here than I think really should be. So that's kind of where I'm at for Blomljud. It's like this is why I go back and forth between whether Doorway to Summer or this one is my favorite record from theirs, because the first disc is my favorite music from Moon Safari, hands down. The second disc, I can kind of take or leave it. So in terms of like a start to finish runtime, I would much rather listen to A Doorway to Summer. But if I can pick and choose, I'm listening to that first just disc of Blomljud like over and over and over again. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at for this.
Okay, so this one's better for you because I will agree on most things you've said on here. So yeah, the first disc on here is it's just completely and utterly brilliant. I like it so much. I love
Mhm.
it. It has, accompanied me through so many things. I've listened to it so many times by now. Everything basically from like, Constant Bloom to The Ghost of Flowers Past is just so good. If they released that as an album, like as a standalone album, not as a double album, this would
Mhm.
be like on another league from anything else.
It would be
And
past
this is,
S.
yeah, it would be past S. What goes after S? This one's really great, and this one's also, yeah, I do have some emotional connection to it because for some reason I got to know some prog that came out in like the 2000s, and it seemed to me by that point that everything that was prog or prog related at that time was very dark, very,
Mhm.
leaning towards metal or at least neo prog, and it's,
Yeah.
kind of dark sound. And suddenly these guys came out of nowhere and they're so vibrant, they're so
Mhm.
lively, they celebrate their music. It's not like a commemoration of sound, it's a celebration of sound. That's
Mhm.
definitely what I like about this one. And it just blew me away. And like, right from Constant Bloom, which it's definitely not my favorite track from here, but I think it's the one I appreciate most because it achieves so much with so little. And I
Mhm.
know that like in their shows they do this one as their anchor
Yeah.
usually. And like it's a brilliant track that leads you into this album. And
Mhm.
then of course you have Methuselah's Children, which I think at one point I put it like my top songs of all time, and
Mhm.
it has been a while, but I think it still is like somewhere over there, like at least in my top 10. It is
Absolutely.
such a fantastic track, like
Mhm.
on another league than anything else. And I believe to be this one, they're most progressive as well. For some
Mhm.
reason, I find it to be most progressive. It's the least expected one out of all of their discography, in my opinion. So like
Mhm.
every song of theirs can go in many different directions, and especially their longer pieces.
Mhm.
But this one just keeps on amazing me, even though I know it like by heart, and I've
Mhm.
listened to it so many times. I get emotional when I listen to it. It just, I crank the volume all the way up to 11 because of it, because
Mhm.
it just
Absolutely.
is so fantastic. And, there are certain albums like these where you have such a great track that nothing, compares to it afterwards. But this one, just really paves the way for a fantastic, at least first side, I'll say the first like disc.
Yeah.
And then like in the countryside, I would have to say that in the countryside is one that you know, it's really hard for me to like it as much because I always tend to listen to it right after Methuselah's Children. So
It's
it's,
the weakest of the first disc,
it probably is.
but
But it's pretty
hmm,
short, and then you get to Moonwalk and Bluebells, and like you kind of forget the fact that it just happened.
mhm.
And then we come to the second side, and this one is where I this one is where I get to conflicting thoughts about this album,
Yeah.
mainly because of the other half of the sky.
Mhm.
It's a big epic. It's 31 minutes long, and it's definitely not as good as it could be, and it's too long for what it tries to accomplish.
Yep.
And I don't connect to it like I usually do to epics in many ways. And like as I
Mhm.
said, I'm a big fan of the longer pieces, but this one just doesn't sit right with me. But at
Mhm.
the same time, this still feels like a perfect album.
Mhm.
So I'm really conflicting on this one. But as I said, if you just took like the first CD, the first disc, it's beyond my comprehension in some way, and I really, really love this one.
Yeah. And this is where I'm conflicted, right? Like, where would I want to put this? Because the first record, it's beyond an S, but the second record is more in like the A B, leaning more towards like the B. So like,
Yeah.
do I downgrade the overall finished project to an A, even though it has some of the best music ever recorded on it, or do I elevate the music that doesn't get me as excited to like an S? That's kind of where I'm conflicted. So like, I'm going to, what do you think? Because I'm debating right now between an A or an S.
So unfortunately, I think I would put it at an A.
Mhm.
Although, as you said, it's like I don't like putting this one at an A because I know what's found on it. But
Mhm.
in all honesty, I have to admit that I like sometimes just leave this album after like the first part of it and just don't last to the end, which is really unfortunate. And I think they kind of outdid themselves in like the bad ways in some way.
Mhm.
Making a double album as your second album is, you know, it's wishful thinking in some way.
It's a big
And
task. Yeah.
yeah, it is a big task, but and that is to say, this album, like is far superior to a lot of different things I've heard
Mhm.
so far. But I feel bad at putting it in an A, and I know that the reason I come back to it is because it really has its perfect part. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think I'll have to agree with this one. Yeah.
Good, because that was like, I was having some, when I was thinking about this, I'm like, how on earth am I going to rate this one in terms of like where I'm going to put it in here? Because like, do I sully the S or do I elevate those other tracks? So let's move on. Let's move on to their third record of Lover's End.
Lovers End.
I'll let you take the reins
Oh.
on this one because I took the reins on the last one.
So this one is the one I am, let's say, the least familiar with, and
Okay.
be mostly because I just don't come back to it too often. As
Mm-hmm.
I said, I listened to this one like before doing this video,
Mm-hmm.
because I did want to listen to it again. But honestly, if I ever come back to it, it's mainly for the title piece and A Kid Called Panic.
Yep.
That is to say, I don't think this is a bad album, just not my cup of moon safari, if you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean.
Yep. I
Um,
know exactly what you mean.
yeah,
Yep.
it still has the sound, and I think if I had to really talk about them, so I'd say A Doorway to Summer is like Moon Safari colored, but just not as vibrant, and
Okay.
Blomljud is very Moon Safari, very vibrant, just doesn't hit the right notes, and
Mm-hmm.
this one is, yeah, it is like it has the same characteristics of any Moon Safari like album so far, but it meanders somewhat in
Mm-hmm.
things that they're not what I was looking for in this album. Of course, it's only natural for them to try new things and like
Mm-hmm.
explore different regions of music, and they did so with the next album as well.
Mm-hmm.
um, but this one, it's okay. I like it. I think that overall, if I had to say about Moon Safari, that's why it's really hard for me to do like a tier list like this, because
Mm-hmm.
honestly, my perfect Moon Safari album is comprised of various Moon Safari songs. Like, it's compilation of their songs. It's not any
Right.
singular release by them,
Right.
and that's
Right.
really hard for me.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a lot to say about it. I really
Mm-hmm.
love A Kid Called Panic, and I know I'm being basic on here
Mm-hmm.
because who doesn't like that track? But
Yep.
it's really good. It's really emotional, and like it's like one of the few tracks of Moon Safari, other than Methuselah's Children, which I really love the lyrics to as well.
Mm-hmm.
I find like that this song in particular, I listen to it sometimes just to enjoy the words that are delivered on it, even not the way that they are. I think they have mastered some of their sound even better on here, which is really, really nice. And if I remember correctly, this is the one where they kind of ditched using any like collaborators on this album. So I believe
Mm-hmm.
by far they had like various people playing some other instruments, but this one is solely made by the band themselves, only the members of the band.
Yep.
And you can definitely hear that on here. It is
Mm-hmm.
still fun, it is still joyous, it's celebrating, like it's a celebration of sound, but it's not what they made in the past, and I can definitely see why people would say that this is their favorite Moon Safari album, and I think that's a part of the charm of this band.
Mhm.
You can really find people like that would say that every other album is like their favorite. So this one is definitely good, and for the right person it's the right album. It's not like, there isn't any definitive album by Moon Safari that I can say that is objectively just bad, because none of them are even getting close to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I really like this one, but it doesn't come close to like the
Yeah,
first two.
I'm in the same boat. Like this album has some of their best and most realized Moon Safari music, like Lover's End Part 1 and A Kid Called Panic. Absolutely some of their best music. It's when we get into like the thick of it in terms of the album, like Southern Belle, The World's Best Dreamers, and New York City Summer Girl. I'm not big fans of. Like, I appreciate that they're trying shorter tracks. They're trying a little bit more accessible music in that sense. The only one of these like shorter tracks that I do like is Heartland. I like
Mhm.
where it goes. I like the ebb and flow of this track. I love the higher highs that they have, and they do concentrate a lot on the vocal aspect of this. I also think that the like the second longest track of Cross the Rubicon, I don't like it as much as everybody else does. Like it's a fine closing piece. I don't feel as though the crescendos that they were aiming for kind of reached the height that they were expecting or hoping. Like it's still a fine track and it's a good time, but like almost 10 minutes to get where we were, I'm not quite sure. And Lover's End Part 2, I actually really love. Like I love how it ends on this kind of somber, melodramatic note. I think if they had trimmed back some of these smaller tracks, like the Southern Belle, The World's Best Dreamer, The New York Summer Girl, I think if we kind of trimmed those back and even like reworked Cross the Rubicon and actually kept on Lover's End Part 3, which is
Yeah.
the 24-minute, like if they had ended this album with that and completed the Lover's End cycle, this would have been probably their strongest work. Um,
So yeah, I have to admit, I never listened to Lover's End Part 3 because I'm still
oh,
having some expectations of doing like some sort of a episode, maybe live stream on just that one track. I'm
mhm.
being conflicted because it's not really an album.
It's an
It's like
EP,
this
yeah.
one. Yeah, it's an EP, and I don't really do EPs, but
Yeah.
I know that I have to do something with it, and I thought to myself maybe I'd listen to it like in preparation for this one, and I told myself I wouldn't.
Hmm.
But honestly, I I maybe should have, and that's one of the things that I really wanted to say about this one. It doesn't have this this big epic on here, the one like they did in the last
Hmm.
two.
Hmm.
Uh, and it's definitely an artistic choice, and I
Yep.
think it could have replaced these shorter tracks and maybe did magnificence to this album.
Yep.
But honestly, I think the word that really describes this album for me, like besides the really memorable ones, is of course the opposite, just being somewhat forgettable. I really had to refresh myself like on this album. I listened to it and I listened to it very intently before this one because I don't know. I put this on in the background whenever I'm doing things, but I don't put this on to, close my eyes and just enjoy the music for what it is. I put it on because
Hmm.
I know it's quality music, uh,
Yeah.
but it doesn't form the same connection with me. So maybe Lovers End Part 3 is what this, specific album really needs and just
It
doesn't
is.
have.
Yeah. If you get a chance, and I know you're already got so many albums on the docket, there are two live albums, the Gettysburg Address, which came out just after this album came out, but before Lover's End Part 3 came out, as well as Live in Mexico. Both
Mm.
like Live in Mexico came out after Himlabacken Volume 1, so there's a couple album tracks from that. Um, it they might be the best actual Moon Safari albums that they've ever put out, um, because they kind of take the bits and pieces that they love. But yeah, Lovers End Part 3 is so beautiful, especially the ending. Like it wraps the whole Lovers End story up. And I think that if you had made the Lovers End album, like Lovers End Part 1, A Kid Called Panic, then go into like Heartland, Lover's End Part 2, maybe reworked Cross the Rubicon. And I would like, if you want to add Southern Belle or one of the smaller ones, and then ended it off with Lover's End Part 3, this would have very easily been their strongest work. But it just feels a little incomplete, which is
Yeah.
so odd to say with, tracks like Lover's End Part 1 and A Kid Called Panic.
Yeah.
So where do we want to put this guy in the tier list?
So I'm feeling I said that everything has like its weight, and of course I wouldn't go rating this one like without considering, of course, Lover's End and A Kid Called Panic. But to me specifically, these are the tracks that I remember this album for and no more. So it's a B for me, and I
Okay.
can definitely say that there's enough reasons for this one being an A. And if I'm comparing it to a lot of the things that I listen to like on a daily basis, this is like definitely an A. But as compared to the two others, I just don't feel like it's right putting this one on the same tier as Blomljud. It's just,
Yep.
it's a bit
Fully agree.
blasphemous.
Yeah, I fully agree. Fully agree. Like, and this is where I kind of have to remove the rating it across all music and rating it in relation to themselves. Because, like, if I was just rating this across all music, this is very easily an A album. But looking across the albums themselves and really like getting into the nitty gritties, yeah, this one is compared to Blomljud, it's a B album if Blomljud is an A album. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Which brings us to the final one. They're unfortunately, up until now, still their most recent one from 2016, or sorry, not 2016, 2013, if you can believe it. That's almost 10 years. Yeah, Himlabacken Volume 1. As I mentioned at the beginning, this was the first album of theirs that I could get excited over because this was the new album. I could actually be there on release day and listen to it all new instead of having to find it later on. This has the same issues that Lover's End Part 2 does, because when the tracks hit hard, they hit extremely hard. And I love those tracks, like Too Young to Say Goodbye, Mega Moon, and Sugar Band. I absolutely love. Like, I
Okay.
love Mega Moon. It's one of my favorite tracks from them. Sugar Band has some of my favorite moments on it. Too Young to Say Goodbye is such a fun, happening track. But again, much like Lover's End, some of the smaller tracks just don't quite do it for me. Like, I do enjoy Diamonds. I like, the concept of the track. I love the homages to like Pink Floyd and whatnot. My Little Man is a fun, smaller track, very intimate. Red, White, Blues is okay, and Barfly I can kind of take or leave. And even like some of the moments on Sugar Band, like it takes a while for Sugar Band to get going. And once it gets going, I'm like, this is amazing. And there's like 3 or 4 minutes of just brilliant music, but then it peters out at the end and I'm less excited about it. So this is a very interesting album for me because in one respects, it's their weakest of all their albums to date in terms of being very like a varied album. Like it's varied in terms of quality. But it also has some of their most interesting music. Like Mega Moon is such a strange and quirky track that I can't help but love. So that's kind of where I'm at for Himlabacken Volume 1, where it's so quirky, it's so strange, it's so interesting. When it hits hard, but when it doesn't, it just feels very lackluster. So that's kind of where I'm at for Himlabacken Volume 1. Where are you at for this album?
So as I said, Himlabacken Volume 1, which by the way means Heaven Hill, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
it does indeed.
Yeah, so this one I got exposed to it, as I said, like I think it was about 3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And since then I gave it 2 listens, but as I do my reviews, I often I really concentrate on the music to get a proper understanding of it.
Mm-hmm.
So the first time is doing a very good analysis of the music, very critical. The second one is just seeing what sticks, what doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, some of it sticks. Honestly, like nothing that you've mentioned is really what I truly like about this album.
Okay.
I would overall agree with most of like your thoughts and opinions on it. So yes, this is one that's definitely more experimental. They've tried new things on here, and it's only normal for a band to do it in like their fourth studio album. As I said, it's pretty impressive that they had their sound like right from the get-go. You don't see that often, but it's also pretty understandable for them to try new things.
Mm-hmm.
This one to me, and I described this in my video saying that for some reason it feels like this one has two types of songs. Either pretty typical, maybe more, vibrant neo-prog songs,
Mm-hmm.
or either B-sides from Disney movies.
That's a good
I
way to
don't
put it.
know
Yeah.
why. I don't know
Yeah.
why, but a lot of the songs on here like really sound like themes to Disney movies, and I have nothing against it.
Some of my
I think
favorite
it's pretty
movies.
fine,
Yeah.
but oh, okay, you've jumped ahead. Okay,
Sorry, I said it's
um,
some of my favorite movies.
yeah, okay. So definitely the most different one out of all of them. It doesn't really sound like they're happy for just being happy and doing their music like this. This one takes some more somber tones, or at least some undertones in some way. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I thought this one, I know that it's supposed to be somewhat conceptual, although I didn't really get it. So, like, the first track of Kids starts off like in a very great manner, like you'd expect this one. It has the lyrics of a concept album. It has
Mm-hmm.
like the motifs being introduced in the beginning, and I was really expecting for it to emerge into this big concept, but it just kind of doesn't. It kind of lingers into Young to Say Goodbye, but then Mega Moon is just something completely different, and
Mm-hmm.
there's really not talking about it. My personal favorite from this album specifically is Barfly, or Barfly. I don't really know
Interesting.
what it's
Yeah,
supposed to be.
Barfly.
I really, really like this track. I think it's
Hmm.
really good. It hits all the right points for me.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't go saying that it's one of my favorite Moon Safari, because it doesn't necessarily feel like what I'm expecting from Moon Safari.
Mm-hmm.
It's like something kind of different. So it's really odd for me to place it like next to my favorites from their other albums, but I really
Mm-hmm.
like it. I really enjoyed My Little Man, like for its
Hmm.
absurdness. Like it isn't of course absurd, and like it isn't like Frank Zappa experimental, but it just
Right.
really stands out. It's a sore thumb, and I'm happy to have it because there's just basically a guitar and singing and
Yeah.
nothing more than that, and like
Yeah.
this just blew me away, and I think it's pretty cool, and it shows some real great playing on there, like extracting it down to its bare essence with the guitar. It just really sounds good. I also
Mm-hmm.
really like Diamonds. I think it's a great track.
Yeah.
Not my favorite, but one that I kind of flew over my head is Sugar Band. I don't really know why.
Mm-hmm.
When you mention it, like I
Yeah.
can't really
It's
seem to recall what's the main appeal of it, and
right.
that's really interesting.
Yeah. It takes
Why do
its
you like it?
I love it because the big like explosion of sound at the midpoint, because like it takes its time to get going, and I'm okay with that. Like I appreciate a track that takes its time to like get to where it needs to go, but and it, with the caveat that it goes somewhere very interesting and very fun. And I do love the big fun explosion because it almost feels like, to use your metaphor, it feels like you're at like Disneyland. Like it feels very sugary, it feels very sweet, it feels very fun and a little bit artificial as well, which is, it kind of goes with the appeal. So it's that big explosion of the sound. I just wish that they didn't spend like the next 4 minutes of the track playing everything out without really going anywhere all that interesting at the end. So that's kind of where I'm at for Sugar Band and why I love it so much. Because once we get into that big meat and potatoes of the track, I love it. I absolutely love it. But sometimes, I do have to sit back and think, is the juice worth the squeeze that I'm investing into this track? And I can understand why people will be like, oh, I don't remember that at all, because you have to spend a lot of time in the track before it does anything.
Yeah, so this
Yeah.
one, I don't really know. Like, there's one thing about it. You see, the last track, like Sugar Band, is I believe like 9.5 minutes long. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you
Mm-hmm.
see, mostly on like older albums released on vinyl, you see a lot of albums which have like a longer than usual last track because they want to fill the space. And I just now noticed that this one is 46 minutes long, which means if it was released on vinyl, it would basically fit perfectly. But
Yep.
I don't know if it has any vinyl releases.
I don't think
So
any of the Moon Safari albums have been released on
I've
vinyl.
no, I've never seen any, but it
I've never
seems like
seen it
too
either.
perfect to be, a coincidence, but maybe it is. But the fact that there is this last track which really stretches out more than the rest, like by a long shot,
Mm-hmm.
really makes me feel like they were just, trying to get that runtime. But it is a nice track to me. I think this entire album, it kind of disappointed me because I was really expecting a concept album, and it seems
Yeah.
to me that if they're going to make a part two to it, that means there's some reason for calling them parts, because there is a
Yeah.
story being told, but I just don't find it. And there's nothing that I like dislike more than people telling me, oh yeah, this is a concept album, but I'm listening to it and I have no idea what the conceptual idea is.
Right.
So this album is, yeah, it's a bag of mixed feelings for me because I
Yeah.
did enjoy it and it's still good. It's still Moon Safari, definitely. But I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't say that it comes close to their best. So yeah, but I do really love the cover. I said that I'm a cover fan. I really
Mm-hmm.
like this cover. It's different from what they did so far. I'm really looking forward to just knowing what the cover for the next album, like Himlabacken Volume 2 would look like. Because I
Yeah.
can imagine so many things like, complementing this one.
Mm-hmm.
But
Absolutely.
I really love this one. I think it's a great one. But again, really emanates one thing, but the album just gives off something kind of different. The only thing
Yeah.
that really feels correct to me is like this shade of cyan. I don't know. The music on here really feels cyan to me. I cannot
That's
tell you
fair.
why.
Yeah, no,
But
that's
other
fair.
than that, yeah, this is I think their weakest one, at least for
Yeah.
me. And
Yeah.
hopefully volume two will be, maybe completed. I know that like recently I reviewed I think we're supposed to do an episode on that, but I
Mhm.
reviewed Virus by Haken, and people kept telling me, and I also did my research telling me that there was this other album called Vector, and they kind of sort of completed each other. So no one, like none of them are, fully complete or fully comprehensible without the other. And this
Yeah.
might be that case. Maybe one day when we get the second part, it will all be clear in this album. Like I'd go listening to those two back to back all the time. So who
Yeah.
knows?
And I feel like albums like this, where there is a volume one, you really do need to have the second one either already being recorded by the time the first one comes out or already finished and waiting to be put out. Because Vector and Virus did the same thing, where they recorded pretty much the whole thing all in one like session and put, the Virus in the one and Vector on the other. The other one that I can think of for Prog is like the English Electric from Big Big Train Part 1 and 2,
Uh,
where I would highly recommend. That's my favorite Big Big Train
it's
project.
in I have their full engine, I think that's what it's called.
Yes.
They have like this one release which is both of them in like four extra songs. I
Yeah,
have this one
it's
to listen to and it's like 2.5 hours long, and
it is.
someone put it on the list. I have no idea who's the psychopath. Hopefully it's good
Well,
because
if you need help with that one, count me in because I can talk about that whole thing for a while.
this
Um,
is one of those bands
yeah,
that people keep like talking about, and I have no idea what's so great about them until I give them a listen. So no, they're coming up in like less than 20 days, I think. So I'm really
there you
looking
go.
forward to that.
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
count me if you need help with that. I am
Oh,
here to help. Um, but yeah, in terms of rating this guy, um, I feel okay putting it in C because I agree it's probably their weakest album. It still has like some brilliant music on it and some brilliant moments, but as a whole, I think it is their weakest. So it is interesting that I basically just moved all the records like from the one side right on over to the other side. I didn't do that on purpose. I just did it chronologically, but Yeah, that's kind of you. Do you feel comfortable putting it in the C category, where it's
So
like,
I might have put it in the B category. We have like, so it's really interesting. So we have the same dilemma as we had with like Blomljud and
mhm,
the first album. So you know, there's like the best parts of it are so good they would like immediately go to S tier, but then you have like the other sections of the album,
yeah,
so you like
really
put it down.
drop
So of
down.
course you have that relationship with Lover's End and Blomljud, and you have this
Mhm.
relationship as well. I don't think that there's any moments on this specific album that just blew me away. There are, to me at least, no perfect songs on here. Only, you
Mhm.
know, good songs and, you know, great songs.
Yeah.
So I think C is kind of right. Again, I putting it in a B feels right and natural, but It isn't Lover's End. It
Yeah, and
just
it's weird
it's not
because
the
I
same.
I agree in that like a B album feels good because there's no song on here that really fails. Like there's no flop off of this album, but when you compare it to all the other albums that are on here, it does feel natural the way that it's been structured. So
Yeah,
that's in terms of like all other music, this is probably a very strong B album.
yeah.
But in terms of music that Moon Safari's put out, this is a C album. So
I
I
think
think,
that's the way to look at it.
and I think that's the way we have to look at it. So on that note, I think we can close this off. So thank you so much, Naomi, for coming on and chatting about Moon Safari. Even though
You're
you have so much
welcome.
work already, you have a little bit of homework to listen to Lovers End Part 3. Um, if you want to. It's only 24 minutes.
Ah, it's nothing.
It's
I can do it in
nothing.
my sleep. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So yes, if you haven't already, go check out. I've left the link for Naomi's channel down below. So go like every day there's a new record that, and it's just I wouldn't be able to do a task like this, so I am in awe of your undertaking of this. Is there anything else you want to promote? Anything else you want to tell the viewers?
So I have to congratulate us for, you know, two grown-up adults being able to, throughout the span of almost an hour, move a column from the right side of the
A
screen
Herculean task, really. Yeah.
to the left side of the
Oh
screen.
boy. Yeah,
But you know, it's the journey that matters.
it is.
It's not the result.
That's right.
But yeah, this has been great. I love the fact that there's, you know, not too many albums to talk about because things get messy, and I am pretty pleased with how this one looks.
Mhm.
But all in all, nothing that we can say on here would, like, you know, diminish the fact that Moon Safari are just a fantastic band and they're a grace to our world. And I'm so happy that, you know, like, I got introduced to them. And yeah, this was fantastic. Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
hopefully, I'll get to, you know, do more things. And yeah, Prague is
Yeah.
just so great.
Absolutely. Well, thank you once again for coming on, and thank you all for watching. And I think that's all we've got. So until next time, Notes and Naomi, we are out.
Amazing.